Ngā mihi nunui ki a koutou katoa, ngā rangatira o te mātaua Māui, nau mā haere mai ki te Committee o Regional Planning. To start our day off together in the right tone, in the right space, I'd invite our Pouwhakarai Pere to lead us in karakia or establish our presence.
Kei o tātou tiamana tēnei te mihi kia koe kia kōrua hoki. E arahi nei tēnei committee a Kaunihira, i te rangi nei me ki ra Regional Planning Committee. Hoi anō ka tika ka mihi. Hoi anō e aku rangatira e noho kairunga ki tēnei tēpu kairunga, a tēnei pāku e mihi ki o koutou katoa. Me ki ra ngamate kerungi o koutou, tā tēnā takiwā kai tēnā rohe, kai tēnā pito o tēnei te matawa Māui. Ka mihi, ka tangi, ka mihi, ka tangi. Nō reira rātou ki a rātou hoki mai rā ki o koutou te pito ora. E hāpaitia i tēnei kaupapa nunui ra wā atu, pero tēnei Kaunihira aroha te matawa Māui, a tēnā koutou paramai, tēnā koutou umai, tēnā koutou whakatau mai rā. Kei rungi tēnei te whatitoka a Matariki e tau ke rungi ai tātai. Our karakia for the day will be whakataka te hau. I've deliberately not picked up the microphone so that I can listen to your resignation i te rangi nei. Whakataka te hau. Whakataka te hau ki te tōna. Kia mā kina ki uta. Kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi ake ana te atakura. E teo, e huka, e hauhu, ti e manuia. Tēnā koe te tiamana.
Ngā mihi Pere, and thank you very much for your mihi to all of our members at the committee and to our staff in the room. Also to our members on Zoom. Ngā mihi kōrua, Karauna me Councillor Taylor. Ngā mihi. All right, we'll kick into today's. Do we have any apologies?
We have an apology from Tanya Hopmans.
Oh yes, thank you. Tanya Hopmans and Charlie Lambert, Councillor Lambert. Any others? Could I have someone to move those apologies, please? Thank you, Mike. Seconded by Councillor Ormsby. We'll assume everyone's in favour there and moving on. Oh no, I better ask. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Kia ora. It's all about process. And carried. Thank you very much, Anna-Lee. Welcome everyone to my first day at chairing the RPC. I appreciate in advance your patience and understanding. Ngā mihi nunui. Stage one, that's our workshop. I'm in the wrong agenda. See, it's a good start.
Excellent.
Housekeeping. Oh yes, cool, now I found myself now. Housekeeping. In the event of an emergency, please follow the fastest runner out the doors labelled exit and assemble in the appropriate safety areas, and we'll wait for directions from there.
Well, we'll follow Neil, okay?
Normally about 10 minutes.
Outside of that, do I have any conflict of interest declarations? Kyle, ngā mihi. Confirmation of minutes held on the 16th of February 2022. Alana, do you have a question or are you moving?
I just want to have my minute in fame and say that I thought we sang the waiata after the karakia in the last hui. We didn't sign it. So it says that we concluded by signing the waiata. I have mentioned it and they are going to amend the minutes.
I think that's the Chocolate Fish of the Day award for having read it very carefully.
You have one to give you.
I'll go have to get a box.
Ngā mihi, and those amendments have been forwarded on to governance,
Yes.
who will in turn supply you with the appropriate chocolate fish.
But the rest of the minutes were fine by me.
Kia ora, thank you, Alana. Are there any other comments around the confirmation of the minutes? Can I have a mover for the confirmation of the minutes of the February 16th, 2022? Thank you, Alana. Seconded by? Thank you, Councillor Jarrett. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Ngā mihi. Moving right along, any follow-ups from the previous meeting?
Kia ora, Chair. I can speak to the first follow-up, item 1.
Please and thank you.
This was the formal written agreement to the 2019 agreed terms of reference received from all PSGs. My follow-up action from that was to speak to those PSG appointers through their respective appointees to the Regional Planning Committee so that we can have those duly considered at the appointee level and if agreed, signed, returned back to Hawke's Bay Regional Council. This is at least a year old. So if we can just record, and my apology for not having already done this, if we can just record that that is a follow-up action for Te Pou Whakarai. Thank you.
Ngā mihi nunui. Might be beneficial for our RPC appointed tangata whenua members to also keep a close track of this. It has been well over a year since the terms of reference were sent back to our appointing bodies. Most of us have over that period provided a formal response, so it's just a matter of checking that that response still remains valid and reissuing to our Pou Whakarai and HBRC. Ngā mihi. Any other items? Item 2, Tangata Whenua Hearing Panel Commissioner's Conflict of Interest. Do we have any kōrero on that? Matters arising? What's this, follow-ups?
Gee, you've got a few new entrants coming too.
Ah, awesome. Thank you, Councillor Foss. So we have, I'll just acknowledge that Nikki and Laura have arrived now on Zoom and are also participating on our hui ngā mihi nui kōrua, no maharamai.
Ngā mihi.
Any follow-up matters with regards to number 2?
What our office will do is we've been holding a spreadsheet, Chair, in relation to the current status of those who have completed the MGD course, including Chair's certification. We'll recirculate that because some since the last circulation have actually expired. So we'll recirculate that and also a calendar of opportunities for those who wish to apply for the MGD course, including its certification.
There was a piece of work, sorry, this might be a little bit on the fringe, but it's connected to the hearing panel commissioners. There was a piece of work around defining a solid conflicts resolutions process. Have we got traction over that activity? And
I might be on the wrong channel here, but my understanding was a Simpson-Grierson paper had actually been previously circulated on this.
okay, cool. Yeah, I'll pick that up when we get a chance there.
Chair, I think that was discussed at the meeting of the Hearings Committee on 2 March. And I'm just looking at the minutes of that. We supported the involvement of more local tangata whenua as resource consent hearing commissioners, supports the proposed guidance with the following agreed amendments as to how conflicts are identified and resolved. So that's, I'm pretty sure, landed in that place on that date.
Lovely.
And I thought there was a report given to the RPC after that subsequent board discussion as well.
Yeah, I think this was, yeah, okay.
Mike, kōrero?
Just to let the councillors know that 2 members from the Māori, from the Standing Committee have been appointed to the Hearings Committee.
Ngā mihi. Do we have names for those 2 members?
I can only remember my own.
Well, that's a huge advantage, Mike. Well done. You're doing better than me.
Well, that's a good.
I'm the other one, Mike.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was hoping you would say that.
So, remember my name is Laura?
That's from, so that's for the RPC members?
Yeah.
I thought you mentioned it was for the Māori Standing Committee.
From the Māori Committee.
From the Māori Standing Committee.
Sorry, from the Māori Regional Planning Committee.
Yeah.
For the RPC Committee.
Tangata
Ngā mihi.
whenua.
Kia ora. Right, well, that will come up under item 6.
Yeah.
I don't think it does, actually.
All right, can we move, can I have someone to move the follow-ups, please? Looking around the table, I've got to keep swapping these. Kia ora, Mike, can I have a seconder? Ngā mihi Kiri, all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried, ngā mihi. Moving right on, we've got a call for minor items on the agenda. These items have an opportunity to be discussed but not debated. No items, so we'll move right along. Mike, did I see your hand?
Yes. I just wonder, I might have missed a meeting, just wonder whether my nephew, as a senior Māori manager, has been introduced to everybody. The rangatira line from Ngāti Kere. That was a question.
There was a question. Go ahead.
Kaore anō, not as yet. Aroha mai, nā ku tēnei he.
E whakakike.
Hoi anō e aku rangatira, anei anō e tū, me ki rā, kia whakaatu mai ki tēnei, katahi anō ka kai roto ki tēnei Māori Partnerships Group, kai roto i te kaunihira ārohe a te Matawa Māui. Hoi anō anei au e tūnei e te rangatira e Anthony. Me ki rā he ārero, he māngai mō enei e noho kei runga i te Regional Planning Committee. Ai, tēnei te mihi kia koe rā me ki rā i o taunga mai kei Wainganui ki tēnei kaunihira. Mai te tautoko mai e a pō rangahau Ngāti Kere, nō reira anei au e tū he māngai mō rātou. Nō reira tēnei te mihi nau mai, haere mai. Piki mai, kake mai kei runga ki tēnei ta taumata, nau nei i tono atu, nau nei i toa. Ngā taumahatanga kei runga i o poka hiwi tēnei ka mihi atu. Ka mihi ka tangi, ka mihi ka tangi. Rātou kua mene atu pō me ki rā ki tēnā kei konei te tamāhine e noho kei runga te pau. Nō reira he mihi anō ki tōna whaia i a Marina. Me ki rā ngā mate katoa kei runga i a Ngāti Kere, kei runga i tēnā o ngā pito o tēnei te matau. Engari, tau nei tūnga nei. Tau nei mahi kai roto ki tēnei kaunihira. Mai i tēnei atu tai kuri te awa, tai hoki rā ki tēnā te aho. Koina hoki tau nei nohonganga, pērā anō i a te Rawairama, e ori te ana ki a Nathan e noho nei ki te raki. Nō reira anei au, kāre tōro tāku nei tū, nā ku nei tēnei te he, e te rangatira nei i tā mai i au, nō reira, anei rā, tēnei komiti me ki rā i ōna rangatira, e mihi nei ki a koe, nau mai, haere mai, nau mai, haere mai. To our esteemed councillors and tangata whenua as part of Regional Planning Committee, it's my honour in retreat in some way.
Belated.
Oh, you're putting the heat on. To say this is the first formal opportunity on your behalf to welcome Anthony, albeit that he's been with us for a little while. And we are very fortunate indeed to have Anthony as a person, but to have Ona Pukenga. All his knowledge, experience and skills accumulated over his young tenure to be part of our Māori Partnerships team, in particular in the Southern Relationships Manager's role. Very critical positions in terms of us moving forward, as we discussed earlier on in the financial papers, but in particular in terms of TDT partnerships, treaty partnerships that we're working on as part of our Regional Council Mahi moving towards the future. So on your behalf, please join with me in welcoming this esteemed rangatira, kei waunui a tātou, mai I tēnā Ngāti Kere, Pōranga Hau, to be part of our valued staff of Hawke's Bay Regional Council. So with that, I guess do I have to sing a waiata?
Might as well. You're up there now.
You could sign it.
Well, what I can do is start, and as is in tradition, some of you might sort of meander towards me to join me. Te ara I whanatua ira, ura kawe tū mai nei, e piki I runga, I a marama, e raro ko te matau, te whakatikanga ake ki runga rā. Tati whatere hutai, te arai whanatua ira, ko te uraki au, hei tohu noa ke, ki te kura i te rehutai, te whakawhiti o te rā. Te whakaai o whenua, hoki muri mai au ki te iwi, te arai whanatua ia. A ka piti hono tātai hono rātou kua mihi a kua tangihia. Hoki mai rā kia tātou te hongora, e mihi, e tangi, e mihi, e tangi. Nō reira, e aku rangatira, tēnei mihi atu, tēnei whakatau mai rā me ki rā ki tōna tūranga papaira, nō reira, kei ngā oto e tēnei oto tātarei runga taraki nei, tēnā koutou, a tēnā kou, kia ora hui mai tātou.
Ngā mihi.
Mr Chairman, I don't know whether we need to go back to the conflicts, but he is my nephew.
We won't hold that against him, Mike. Trevor, would you like a quick moment just to, while acknowledging that Pieri has done the appropriate acknowledgement, I'd like to invite you to just introduce your Māori into the space.
Nā te takaro, nā te takahe, māku paku rawa taku mihi whakahuki ki taku rangatira, he ono. E tika tōna kia whakaaro ki a rātou ko ngaro ati ki te pō, ko whae marina tēnā, he toa, he wahine toa, mai pōranga hau, he ono, ko tai kei wanginui i a koutou, a taku wai, Māori e hoki. Tēnā koe uncle, tēnā tātou katoa. Hey, it's honestly my privilege and honour to be here today, and I kind of crashed the party. And so, sorry I didn't announce that I was even coming, but thank you so much for the lovely words and acknowledging one of our star kui o Poranga Hau, Kerry's mum, and he no, I'm not going to say much, and I'm not even going to sing, but tēnā koutou, maybe Uncle Mike might want to sing for me, but I doubt it. Tēnā tātou katoa, katai.
I sound better after a few beers.
Thank you, Trevor. Thank you, Pieri Ngamihi, for that introduction, and also to the committee members for allowing that brief departure from agenda. It's important to take those cultural acknowledgements and give them the respect they need to be afforded. So, Ngamihi, welcome aboard, and by extension, we'll look forward to a more updated or a more personal introduction at the RPC Tangata Whenua meeting, which will be a couple of weeks before the next RPC. So you've got a bit of time to have a cuppa. Thank you very much. Kia ora, Mike, for providing that opportunity. Where are we now? Call for minor items?
Thought that was it.
I thought that was it too. Ka pai. Thank you very much. That leads us on to our decision items, and I'll invite Pieri. No, you'll be doing number 7, won't you, Pieri? So number 6, RPC Tangata Whenua representation on the council's committees. Right, this we can keep reasonably pretty brief. Currently, as is the practice at HBRC, there is a regular opportunity to provide an invitation to Tangata Whenua members to occupy various committees of council in order to ensure that there is a level of participation in whakaaro across HBRC. For about the last year, maybe a little bit longer, I have been, as a member of the Tangata Whenua Regional Planning Committee, have been sitting across all of those committees on behalf of our members. So it's with, just so that I can help us expedite this process, not that we're after speed, we're after outcomes. The opportunity was then handed back out to our Tangata Whenua members at our last meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I'm pleased to introduce a change in the representatives on our committees, because it does speak directly to building capacity, broadening the level of whakaaro that's brought into your committees, but also hopefully it'll enable better feedback mechanisms to all of our tangata whenua members so that given the pace of change, the more informed and the more up-to-date we are and the more we're able to share this workload, the better we are able to work collaboratively towards a kotahi outcome. So with regards to those recommendations, I'll chuck them straight down on the table now. For 1.1, the recommendations are, 1, that the Regional Planning Committee considers the Regional Planning Committee tangata whenua representation on council committees, staff report, and nominates tangata whenua representatives to council committees as follows. 1.1, where RPC members have appointed Alana as a member of the Environment and Integrated Catchments Committee. There are a number of strengths there. 1, because she's already working in that space with our operational staff and iwi governance, and so that reinforces some of the work we want to do in that space, and particularly around identifying risks under the pace of change. 1.2, the Regional Planning Committee tangata whenua members have nominated Kerry as a member of the Corporate and Strategic Committee. And for the same reasons, we're looking forward to building that capacity and that succession planning as Kerry is one of our newer members to the RPC. And so we're hopeful that the relationships that we build for our members will provide a long journey for us to work together. It is about relationships and partnership. 1.3, as a member of the Hearings Committee. So this is Laura. Laura has been appointed as a member of the Hearings Committee alongside Mike Mohi. And the fourth one, 1.4, as a representative on the Hawke's Bay Regional Council with speaking rights only. Oh, I think we glanced over that one.
No, we didn't.
Who was appointed to that?
You.
I was. Right. I'm so glad I took a moment to test my members. Thank you for paying attention at our meeting. Me. So 1.4 is myself. I'll be remaining as a representative for the TWRPC on the Hawke's Bay Regional Council. And so that fills recommendation 1. And now I'll leave it up to the table for discussion. Do we have a staff member who's speaking to this at all? No.
I think it's just easy for you to move the thing and get a second
And roll on from there.
Yeah.
Very good. So I'll move from the chair, given that, oh no, I won't, because I'm on 1.4. Could I have a mover for these? Thank you, Councillor Jerv. And a seconder, Rick, ngā mihi korua. All in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Abstains? Passed. Welcome to the committee team. Now we'll move on to item number 7. Item number 7, governance support for the development of the Kotahi plan. We've allowed 30 minutes for this. I'm going to invite Pieri. Are you going to talk from your location or will you be moving to the table?
I think in line with Orange, it's probably better that I speak from here, if that is okay with you, Chair.
Ka pai.
So please take the paper as read, but what I would like to do is just to highlight it. And that's sort of reflecting back on the paper with slight adjustments as it was introduced last Wednesday to the Māori Committee. And my observation, and it's really probably something we need to take on board in terms of not quite clarity in terms of the paper as it was introduced last week. What I'd like to do is just clarify a few points that might make it easy for discussion here at the Regional Planning Committee level. This is about Kotahi. What it doesn't reflect in the paper is that there has been a whakapapa, so to speak, in terms of bringing us to this point. What is missing in the paper is that in October the 15th in particular, it was described as our Green Shed Day. On that day, despite previous actions on our part to keep those respective committees in their own swim lanes, in particular I'm talking about Māori Committee, Regional Planning Committee, in particular in relation to the RMA responsibilities. What was apparent and what came through from that day was a wish to work together, all of governors, in respect of Kotahi. That was clear. We met again you met again in December. and that was supported once again. And then in January, you went into respective caucus in each of your Māori committee and the Regional Planning Committee. There has been no change from that deliberation and result in terms of working collaboratively, working together as all of governors on Kotahi, notwithstanding the challenge and the tenure of time that lies ahead of us. What is missing, and what you do need, is you need a decision-making framework to be able to process your deliberations at governance level, and as you might receive progress updates on the advance of Kotahi between now and December 2024. This paper here proposes a decision-making framework that recognises what the Māori Committee brings to Kotahi, what this Regional Planning Committee also brings to Kotahi. It does not take anything away from what your contribution or what instruments you have to enable Kotahi to proceed. That's what this paper is essentially about. It's a decision-making framework that is complementary of what each of your committees brings to the Kotahi process and plan as we move forward. It proposes no more than that, although it does talk about respective portfolios. And the last All of Governors process and meeting that you had was really about understanding where and at what time in the schedule and the advance of Kotahi you will play a critical role as governors, notwithstanding a lot of the operational work that will be advanced by staff within here alongside of mana whenua, tangata whenua in those respective catchments. This paper is about a decision-making framework that is complementary of what each of the committees brings, notwithstanding that the Regional Planning Committee at its particular notification time and at progress times has a peculiar instrument and responsibility under the Hawke's Bay Regional Planning Committee Act 2015. This is complementary. Kia ora, Chair.
Ngā mihi. So just to add to Pierre's context there, so I do recall those conversations when we had our first All of Governors meeting. The suggestion came from the table that the Māori Standing Committee and the members of the tangata whenua members of the RPC are essentially accountable and held accountable by the same constituency. Our various abilities to participate in these forums come from a different source. Both are legislative, really, but the Tai Whenua, for example, went through a very exhaustive, very lengthy and quite robust process to be established across Kahungunu that required our kaumātuas and our whānau from various hapu across Kahungunu to journey regularly to one location in order to engage in conversations to build that structure. And so whereas for myself, as an appointed member from a post-government settlement entity, our place at this table is a result of legislation of a different nature and is Crown-based in its origin and construct, but still is accountable to the same people and serves the same people. And so while we have different origins, if you like, or different whakapapa as mediums of participation, the kōrero that was shared on that day was that actually because we both have to report to exactly the same kaumātuas, to exactly the same marae, that there needs to be an element where we get a bit more collaboration between tangata whenua members of the Regional Planning Committee and the work of the Māori Standing Committee. That's not to diminish, as Pierre already pointed out, that they have unique roles and unique obligations, but rather that we recognise we can get some efficiencies collectively, particularly under the Kotahi plan going forward. And so that's positionally where we came from, and this is a mechanism to recognise that decision and a start of a new way for us, particularly within the tangata whenua space, to work collaboratively alongside Hawke's Bay Regional Council in the achievement of its outcomes and objectives in specific regard to the Kotahi plan. So that's sort of my understanding and recollection of that meeting. Are there any comments or kōrero around the paper in front of us at the moment? Ngā mihi.
Oh,
Kiri.
kia ora, Piri, thank you for that. Laura and I weren't here for the start of the Kotahi plan, so it's nice to get context around where the name came from and how that started. I do have one question about an item we discussed in February, and that was putting 3 RPC members forward to work with staff towards the Kotahi development. So I just wondered, we've heard back that they haven't had any contact or information or hui around it. So I was just wondering when that might happen. It was raised by Laura in the All Governors hui in April as well.
Lisa?
If it was raised, tēnā koe, Laura, I apologise. So in the tenure of Kotahi, we would anticipate actually working across all of the catchments with all tangata whenua, which does include at your governorship level, both Māori Committee and Regional Planning Committee, as distinct from actually having 3 that are working directly with staff. Was that around the terms of reference?
No, I don't think so. Was it?
No, there was a
No, it
separate
wasn't.
conversation. That was when we were over in the centre on the parade there. And
Yeah, that was when we first asked about if that would come up.
And there was
or
to be
if
a
that would
committee
remain.
set up, and it was to be three on three. I remember that. I get that. I just can't quite remember exactly what it was for. Wasn't quite the way you described it, but it was agreed that we would set something up and it would be 3 on 3. Exactly. It was agreed that.
My apology, Chair, we're just having a bit of a side discussion here to get clarification around this. Our understanding from that previous hui, tēnā koe Laura, was that was to assist us to actually arrive at what's proposed in this paper here, which is around the structure and how that would work mechanically. And the proposition in this table is to provide an instrument for your consideration and hopefully endorsement about what the decision-making framework that sits in there will look like. Our apology if we did not actually follow through to bring 3 RPC members to that discussion, but it is in the context of this paper here, including its recommendations. That's our understanding of what the task was, notwithstanding we've taken a slightly different route to that. Our apology.
Yeah, I think it would be well worthwhile someone going back through the records and finding out exactly what was discussed. Because I've got it fuzzy in my head, but it's not as sharp as I'd like it to be sharper. I think your question is really on the point. And then I think it'd be helpful if someone circulated that to the RPC members so we're clear about that. But I think the underlying point of it, though, is that when we say we're going to do something, we should do it. And I'm not going to point blame about that, but it's just a question of, the integrity of the process. And I just want to assure you that, this is not something that's been done deliberately. It's more of an oversight mistake and a busy on thing, but we need to get this right and make sure that it is right on every occasion. So we'll lift our game.
Okay, thank you.
Ngā mihi.
Anei.
Thank you. Yep. Councillor
Chair.
Hornsby.
Thank you. So I'm looking on page 29, the Takiwā governance, and we've got some representatives outlined there. Is today's recommendation from the staff to confirm who those governors are in those Takiwā areas? Are you looking for confirmation of those?
It would be good if we could get confirmation on that, Councillor.
It would probably be useful that we have a clear diagram
Yeah.
so that we know who we are, where we are.
We'll produce a much clearer diagram and we can have a discussion next week at the All of Governors. Would that be appropriate?
Yep, just want to clarify who's who and where's where, and is today the decision day for that, or we can leave it to the next day?
The decision today is about an agreement, even if it's in principle, in terms of the decision-making framework. The constituency of that is something that we can do at another time.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. So we look forward to that and that conversation. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, look, thank you, Chair. And further to Councillor Ormsby's question, I wasn't clear, these paragraph 15 of the paper, that a similar diagram had been put up at the workshop, I think in April, and there was going to be an offline discussion about it. I'm just wondering whether the names that appear on the page of the paper that Councillor Ormsby has referred to are the product of that offline discussion, or whether that's still to come. And I think that's pertinent to whether what we're doing here as opposed to next week or whatever it might be.
Cool.
So has that happened? Has that step happened, or is it still yet to happen? Doesn't matter, I just want to know.
James, Perry, who can answer that question? We've got a discussion going over the back. We've gone to the, gone to the crowd, and we're going to phone a friend.
Can you repeat the question, please,
Well,
councillor?
it's just a matter of whether the names that appear on page 29 are the product of the offline discussions referred to in paragraph 15, or they're the same names from last time. Was that yet to happen? I'm just wondering where we're at in that process, that's all.
I believe they're the same names, and I don't think we've had any feedback.
Okay, right.
So I think the expectation was that governors would discuss amongst themselves who was doing what, and give us any indications of what's been suggested is in any way inappropriate or needs changing. But we've got a workshop session next week, or an all governors session next week, which is probably an opportunity to do that on the fly and try and settle this.
I think to come back to Councillor Ormsby's point, I think we could say these are, put it this way, these are suggestions from staff after some consideration as a start of the conversation, and people are more than welcome to come back with alternative suggestions and alternative ways in which to come forward.
Correct.
We need to get to a point where we've got something finalised.
Agreed.
Through Chair, they largely align to your representative boundaries. Most of you, some of you were in two, so we need to discuss that and what that means. The names that we haven't got yet are on the individual topic areas of kotahi, and so we will need those by next week.
All right, I'll move around. So Alana, then Mike.
Just through the chair, in response to that, by next week or at next week?
At next week would be good.
Yeah, just between now and next week.
Mike.
Yes, just to endorse your remarks about these two committees, Regional Planning Committee and the Māori Committee. We actually both serve the same people, as you said. The Māori Committee was formed in the early 90s, with three representatives from the four tai whenua, Tamatea Central, Heretana, Ahuriri and Tuairoa. And in that early days, Elena's dad was the chair. I was part of the, probably after a year or so it started, that committee. And then I became the chair sort of mid-90s. And then I think James tried to get rid of me by offering me 2 bottles of wine. I remember taking the wine. And then, but the Regional Planning Committee was formed by statute. Now, the Māori Committee, as I understand, and prepared to be taken to task, as I understand it, it's an advisory committee, and at the end of each term, the committee, the council laws, can make a recommendation to the incoming candidates that the Māori Committee carry on. Just amongst ourselves, there has been a little bit of elbow jolting between the two committees. And we can blame the chairs, except myself. But I just endorse that we are very much planning to continue a good working relationship. 2 of the treaty groups, Tuhoi, which has a small area at the top in the Hawke's Bay Regional Council area, they did have a delegate, and then they decided if there's any problems, you would go to Tāne Atua to talk to them. So they don't have a representative. And Tū Whare Toa had a representative, and Tātumu decided to make a change there, and I became their representative. So in actual fact, there's 8 Regional Planning Committee members and 9 councillors. It is possible to have another one, but we won't go there.
Just
sorry.
through you, the chair. So we do have 2 from HTST, which makes the 9 to give that co-governance balance.
Okay.
Ka pai. So I'll just bring us back to the paper. Not that we're way off track. and a comment which was passed by the Pouwhakarai Pierre around accepting in principle at this stage. So the main reason why, first of all, acknowledging that this is a mechanism that is put in place as a result of the conversations of all of governors. And so this provides staff with confidence. This provides us with a platform to be able to leverage other decisions and actions off, and so is a necessary part of the operations of HBRC. There is still, the principal side of it is there are components in here which imply commitment, activity and obligation, and so there are conversations that need to happen back out in our various takiwa. I note with interest the comments which were shared on the Māori Standing Committee last week. It was a great meeting to watch. They addressed this item, it was their item 11, particularly some salient points provided by committee member Mare with regards to the current capacity and capability of Māori, and I have put together a graphic which I won't bother pulling up now, which speaks to just the volume of work that I know this council and staff are fully aware of and have acknowledged. But acknowledging it and being aware of it doesn't necessarily mean that suddenly people from within our community are able to stand in these places. There are still capacity issues that we will need to work through. And so agreeing to this in principle is a great place. No? You're going to retract that? Okay, go for it. I'll give the floor to you, Yeri.
Perhaps, and it's not as if you need to mirror the decision that was made at the Māori Committee Wednesday last week. It was supported in terms of the recommendations, which are just slightly different in regards to this regional planning committee. And if you were to work through the recommendations that are there, Chair, that would be good if we had agreement to all of them.
Okay, let's go through the recommendations. Starting with, just look at the bottom. Oh, yeah.
Page 24, Chair.
Page 24, that the Regional Planning Committee receives and considers the Governor's support for development of the Kotahi Plan staff report. 2, agrees that the decisions to be made are not significant under the criteria contained in Council's adopted significance and engagement policy, and that the committee can exercise its discretion and make decisions on this issue without conferring directly with the community or persons likely to have an interest in the decision. So that's consistent with the significant engagements policy. And recommendation number 3 is where we might spend a bit of time. Agrees to work in partnership with the Māori Committee and elected council representatives. 2, lead out the kotahi engagement with tangata whenua and the community in the takiwa. 3.2, support the role of the Māori Committee to consider and endorse the decisions which are required to progress the development of the Kotahi Plan through notification, or through to notification, sorry. And 3.3, combine the Māori Committee and Regional Planning Committee meetings to form an all of HBRC Governors Group to workshop and make decisions on Kotahi. So those are our recommendations. Can I have any comments from the floor around that? I'll chuck something out first. Sorry, I didn't even look up for hands. Do we have any hands? On the wall, we've got one. Was it a finger note? One, I just would like more understanding, please, around 3.1 engagement, what that means. Outside of what is the role of our committees and the functions of the committee and where we operate in those spaces. And 3.3, could you give me more clarity around what combining the committees means?
Perhaps just go to your first question, Chair, which was around 3.1, clarification around that.
Yep.
Leading out responds directly back to a request from the All of Governors that you be engaged, and what sits in this paper and what has been discussed previously was where we are proposing, and this is from your staff within council, as to where that is absolutely critical. Governors leading, sponsoring, championing in terms of Kotahi. And I guess part of that is recognition that there is critical and a governorship lead, and then there is allowing those on the ground to get on with it at an operational level. That's what 3.1 is about, recognising and responding to your request from within the All of Governors discussion. 3.3, was that the other one?
Yep.
And that's very much part of the All of Governors. It is reflected in 3.2, and that is recognising that the Māori Committee, given its 31-year tenure and its direct connection with marae, because that's where the representatives are drawn up into the tai whenua, is an absolute critical part of engaging directly within the takiwā at that level. And it's about recognising that and seeking that they endorse that as what is happening in Kotahi, that then goes through the RPC instrument within the Hawke's Bay Regional Planning Committee Act provisions. It's about recognising your complementarity in terms of progressing Kotahi.
If I could add to the answer of that, the current structure of the council is that we have a Māori committee, which is there for general issues. It's been long-standing, one of the first Māori committees created by a council in New Zealand. We have the Regional Planning Committee, which is a combination of PSGEs and councillors who, by legislation, are given responsibility for overviewing the making of plans, which they make recommendations for council to finally sign off. And those of you who've been around for a while have recognised that we've had some tensions about those things. So what we have is we have separation, and I put it this way, by walls between different groups. What was proposed at the very first meeting we had was to have all of the governors in the room at the same time, looking at all of the issues and going through the stuff together. So I've characterised it as governance, decision-making without walls. Now, we had a discussion on that on 2 or 3 occasions, and everybody agreed with that. There's no dissent to it. But Perry, being the sort of thorough person he is, made the point to me that we had never made a formal decision about this. And so this is about formalising that. So if that's what we're going to do, we need to make a decision, both at the Māori Committee and the Regional Planning Committee and Council. So we are agreeing that we're all going to be in the room together at the same time to go through the issues and jointly make decisions about the issues, which I think are really simple. We all agree, and the community all agrees, that the quality of our environment is substandard. It needs to be improved. And to improve it, we need better rules. And to make rules, we need plans, and that's Kotahi. So this is about us all working together to ensure we have a better plan and better rules to protect our environment for today and for the future. That's what it is. So rather than do it separately, we do it together. The second element about this is that to date, plans have generally been led by the staff who've come along and done the science of work and put it all in front of us. At that point, governors have a look at it and get involved. What this process is doing is putting governors in the beginning and the development phase of it, so we all have sight of how things are going. So we're in the conversation from the beginning. So everybody's in a governance position within the Regional Council has sight of this from the beginning. And the ambition of this is that to be able to get through this planning process with Kotahi quickly, efficiently, and more importantly, that having gone through the process together, we will agree on what the outcomes are, and we will therefore have agreement on the plan and implement the plan for the betterment of the future. So we will be working as governors to internalise and resolve the issues ourselves, rather than going externally and having someone else try and resolve the issues for us. So that's the philosophy, the principles of it. So we have to, at some point, have a formal sign up to this. We've done it informally on several occasions, but now simply, are we agreeing to do this? Māori Committee said, put the hand up, said, yes, we agree. So it's now to the RPC to say whether they're in or out.
Thank you.
Make a comment?
Councillor Williams.
My first, I guess my starting position is that I defer to the RPC members who are PSG representatives on this issue.
Yep.
So what I'm trying to package in my head is I love the analogy decision making without walls. That is where we're at, as I understand it. But there is a terms of reference at the moment under statute which says that the RPC will make a decision on the form of any Kotahi plan that's notified. So I think we would need to at least be very clear that we're in effect bashing down the walls and equally clear that there's nothing in the statute that says we can't do that. But just park that thought for a moment. Where I've been immersed in the reads, perhaps, is in this table on attachment 1, where there's a whole number of different stages for the project and governors coming in at different stages. So we have takiwā model, we have topic structures, and the idea, as I understood it, is that without those walls being in place, we can very much in the engagement phase, shoulder to shoulder, lead the engagement with our communities, whether we're RPC or Māori committee or elected members under the current structure. And equally, at the point at which we reflect on that engagement and options are put up to us for how we deal with the issues that the community is concerned about. And equally at the point, I think, where we issue a draft notified plan, which is one of the next steps. The only possible wrinkle, I would think, in terms of our terms of reference in the statute would be at the point of actually, and this is probably 2 years away, who makes the call on what is formally notified, which is the resolution at 3.3. So that, I think, you know, working together through the whole process just simply makes sense in where we're at. And there's a whole number of steps that can add a huge amount of value, including fronting with the community, looking at options, draft form plan. Just a little bit caution, defer to the PSG reps on the actual formal decision phase of notifying the plan. That's
Can I respond to you on that? Because I think this is, you've got the point that I may not have, I did think I explained previously, but I need to be clearer about it.
Yeah.
The vision I have for this is that if everybody is together and all of governors agree on the plan, then the expectation is that the RPC and the councillors will endorse that as simply a formality.
Yes. Yes.
So there will be a formal decision of the RPC, there will be a formal decision of the council, but it's all been pre-agreed.
Yeah.
So
Sure,
that's
right.
that's how it should be. There's no point in doing this unless we come to that conclusion. So if there's disagreement, it needs to be on the table before we get to the formal thing and resolved at that point. And I think I used the analogy, it's a little bit like ministers travelling overseas to sign trade agreements. Yeah, all the work is done beforehand. It is the formality at the end of it. So the RPC and the council will be a formality because we've all been through this, we all agree. So I think that's the solidity of it.
I mean, does 3.3 need to say and make decisions on kotahi before they are adopted by the RPC and notified to the public?
I'd be happy to have that added as because I think it's implied in my head, but it's not clear.
Councillor Curtin.
Well, that's Councillor Williams has picked up on the issue. The only reservation I've got is the term "make decisions" in 3.3, because what it's saying is the combined committees make the decision.
Yeah.
And yet statutory obligations make that not tenable. So I just wanted, to workshop and refer that their views to that committee. Some expression that captures the need for to comply with the statutory obligation.
Well, I think we can get some advice on that, because I think both the council and the RPC could very easily defer its decision-making to that single body and make one decision at the same time. Or we could do sequentially, but either way.
Through you, Chair.
We'll go to Katrina and then we'll come to Councillor Dura.
Just in response to Councillor Curtin, there are decisions that need to be made about the content of the plan along the way. That is separate from the decision to notify that can only be with the RPC. Happy to clarify that in 3.3.
Wonderful.
Well,
Hang on.
sorry.
That's your subject. We'll go there. Okay, cool. Go, Neil. And then
Yeah, I'm just a little challenged by the notion that an entity, standalone entity set aside from the RPC, is designated to make a decision. And I can see the intent, but I'm just a little cautious about establishing that outside the RPC statutory. If we didn't have the statutory framework, it wouldn't be a problem, but we have.
Sheriff, I'll get a reply from staff.
Carry on there.
Katrina?
Through you, Chair, in terms of the National Policy Statement for Fresh Water and our requirements to implement the principles of Te Mana o Te Wai, the first principle being mana whakahaere, requires the team, the officers, to engage at the marae and hapu level that is inherently connected to the tai whenua. And so they are required to work and have the tai whenua or the marae make decisions in terms of the value setting and so forth in the plan. So that is required by statute. But in terms of the content of the plan.
That at the end of the day, that doesn't bypass the obligation to the RPC.
Correct. The obligation to the RPC is in terms of notifying the plan.
Well, no, I'm not convinced of that. I think there is a process that the RPC goes through, given its nature, that is deliberative on the way through. I don't think you can automatically defer that content of the RPC and its capacities, defer or abrogate that to another entity. I'm not convinced you can do that you simply come in at the end and say, RPC, now you make the decision to notify. Is that the only, if you like, element of deliberation that the RPC would engage in on that issue, other than its membership of a joint committee?
Through Chair, no, that's the point of this governance structure, is that they are side by side with the Māori committee.
And the other thing is, it's not a separate committee, an outside organisation. It is basically the one and the same people, with additions being the Māori committee. So it's not different in it being an outside entity. But we've got plenty of time to work out how the final stage can be worked through. I'm sure we get some legal advice on it and sit there and work out exactly what it's required.
I'm pretty sure the will follow the way. The way could follow the will. I'm sure it could.
All right, well, Councillor Van Beek.
Yes, so if you look at the subject for this item, it's governance support for development of the Kotahi plan. So if we could actually add that to 3.3, because it says here quite in black and white, workshop and make decisions on Kotahi, the development on the So if we actually add the word development of the Kotahi plan, the word RPC is in there, it's in conjunction. I don't have any problem with it, as long as it clearly indicates that it's development of the plan. But finally, it will be the RPC that will actually notify, as we did with TAG.
Perhaps, Chair, just to add to the councillor's corridor there, at paragraph 4 of the report, it talks about Māori Standing Committee considering and endorsing decisions and the Regional Planning Committee formalising those decisions. The papers to the RPC and the Māori Standing Committee were different to reflect the different committee formalities.
So do you think, so question to staff then, do you think, given the statement, the clarity of paragraph 4 and the comments from Councillor Van Beek, do you think that recommendation 3.3 stands in its current wording?
Perhaps what we could do, Chair, with everyone's agreement, is that we might rework 3.3 to recognise what's come through from this discussion. That might be combining the Māori Committee and Regional Planning Committee meetings in the development of Kotahi, and recognising the escalation to the Regional Planning Committee for the formal recommendation to council.
Councillor Foss, sorry, I can only think of your first name, Craig, sorry.
It's all right. Thank you. Actually, my question just got answered right there. The final decision-making body is the council, because this body recommends to the council, so it actually doesn't make decisions. It makes decisions about recommending things as opposed to final decisions. So your last few words captured my concern or my issue, so thank you for that.
So based on that, then, are we looking to leave 3.3 on the table? How do we work this? What happens here?
If this committee were to accept that amendment to 3.3,
Okay.
that combined the Māori Committee and Regional Planning Committee in the development of the Kotahi plan and process, leaving for the Regional Planning Committee to make recommendations and endorsement to the Regional Council.
Well, it could do it that way. I mean, it's kind of then saying we've got separate functions again, which I'm not quite as easy with. I thought we all wanted to be on the same journey together, and that I would have thought you could easily have made a decision, come to a conclusion that the All of Governors meeting will make the decisions on as part of the All Governors Committee, given that it consists of the RPC and the councillors, will make the final decision on the notification plan.
Chair, you've got to go
Just say
through.
that would be ultra vires, the actual wording of the Hawke's Bay Regional Planning Committee Act 2015 that sets out.
I have a solution, I think. It's what everything Pierre just said, and working together on the development of the plan, just have, you could put at the end, subject to the requirements of that act. It's all in there. At the end of the day, that is what it is. You just put on the end, subject to the requirements of that act.
Happy with that? We can't act ultra vires.
So normally we don't, we go outside acts normally, do we?
No, but it's just making sure we don't have to write the whole blooming act into the,
Yeah, I know.
who's doing what on every little step. It's just at the end of the day, there's a statute there and we recognise that. That's what I'm thinking.
All right,
Good corridor. It's been a...
we're up to Chair.
Right, we've got another potential amendment to 3.3.
Did you record that, Annalee?
More or less.
Can we have it one? Do you want to read back for us, please, Annalee?
Okay, so first of all, I had Pieris combine the Māori Committee and Regional Planning Committee meetings in the development of Kotahi plan and process, subject to the requirements of the Act. Is that what you mean?
Subject to the requirements of the Regional Planning Act.
RPC Act.
What about the council bit?
That's in there.
What's in the
Oh,
Act?
sorry, that's in the
Yeah.
act. I missed it.
That's what I mean. All the
It sets
subtleties
out
are
the
in the
process
act.
in the Act.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would be, that final part would be subject to the Hawke's Bay Regional Planning Committee Act 2015.
I don't want to throw, I think it's a good outcome. I just would be interested to appreciate the process that's involved here. And my own view is I'd be more cautious about uncoupling the RPC from the process, given its statutory obligation. And I wondered whether there is a process where considerations of the joint committee on the way through are in fact committed to a paper coming to the RPC progressively. So there is this continuity between the obligations to the RPC. There is a trail of, if you like, recommendations coming from the RPC, which are which reflect those considerations on the way through. So ultimately, when it is referred for or recommended for consenting, there's a trail of deliberation by RPC.
Well, the way this council operates will always create a trail, because if there is to be a plan that all of governors agree to, there will be a plan. And the all of governors, I would imagine, would, by normal process, forward that to be considered by the RPC, which would, having RPC members having participated in it extensively, would be I'd be stunned if they didn't simply agree with it, because they've been through the process from the beginning. And then the RPC itself isn't the end of it, goes to the council itself for final sign-off. And the RPC would then send the paper to the council for sign-off again. All councillors having participated in the process, I would expect to be stunned if they didn't simply say, great decision. So it'll have to be a paper trail to tick the boxes. But we'll all know what the end result is before it starts. That's the whole purpose of doing it jointly.
I agree.
Sorry?
Exactly, so we won't end up in a tank.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
Yeah. I just make one other observation to the gathered. The rest of the country is wrestling with how to approach these issues in a way that joins up Māori and traditional institutions. And you'll see a lot of discussion going on about pro-co-governance, anti-co-governance, etc. There's all sorts of stuff going on. What we have in front of us here is quite an unusual situation for the country. We are quite markedly different in the way we're approaching this, and it is an all-embracing process. Everybody's in, everybody participates, everybody has equal rights, everybody has equal say, and we're just getting on to do it. So we're actually, in many ways, leading other areas in how we're doing this. And I think we shouldn't lose sight of this. This is kind of a little bit experimental, but it's got a hell of a good chance of working for the benefit of our community.
Before I pop back over to the Pou Whakarai, anything from the wall or the table? Mike?
Yeah, I just agree with what the co-chair there. In my environmental job across the whole country, and I tell them about, first of all, it was the Māori Committee and then the Regional Planning Committee, and they can't believe how one council can be so far ahead of everybody else. So that's puffing our chest out for Kahunguna and the councillors and this regional council.
I'll support those comments. Pou Whakarai?
I was just, Chair, on page, well, it's the attachment 1, Kotahi High Level Timeline. So I'll just give you time just to get to that. And we have milestones that are identified in there. There are 3 parts to this. One is all of Governor's development. That's both Māori Committee and also the Regional Planning Committee, and the development through these respective stages. There are 2 in there that are particular in terms of the Regional Planning Committee, notification to Regional Council, recommendations rather. That's the pre-notification Kotahi draft, which is the fourth one on the list, and then the Kotahi notified. So those are 2 where Regional Planning Committee has a decision to make, but would be reliant under an all of Governors regime in terms of endorsement, as well as the participation in the development of the Māori Committee. So 3 things here. One is all of Governor's development participation. Second one is endorsement in terms of the Māori Committee, given its direct connection through to the marae, the work on the ground. And then the 2 important decision-making points for the Regional Planning Committee, which is what it's required to do under the Act. Pre-notification, Kotahi draft, and notification. It's recognising that each has a part to play in this process, notwithstanding that one might be legislative in terms of the Regional Planning Committee.
Ka pai? So, before we roll forward, can we have the kupu up on the wall? And we'll just confirm amendments to the motion 3.3, where we've made a couple of changes. So at the moment, can I get confirmation that the text so is there anything else we need to add, amend or alter to that motion as it sits? Which, for the benefit of those who can't see it, because I can't tell who can and who can't, 3.3 currently reads, combine the Māori Committee and the Regional Planning Committee meetings in the development of Kotahi plan and process, subject to the requirements of the RPC Act.
Chair,
Councillor Williams.
there are, the words you could add after meetings from the original resolution are not strictly necessary, but to form an all HPRC governors group could be added between meetings and in.
Yep.
Just so that we're naming it.
Within the motion.
Good career in law.
Pierre?
And if we can just record, so there is no Regional Planning Committee Act, there is a Hawke's Bay Regional Planning Committee Act 2015.
Thank
There's
you.
the Hawke's Bay region, that's right. Yeah, we know what you mean.
Meetings to form an.
I think the words in should then become for.
After group 4,
Yeah, so
development. Beginning of the red text. Yep.
After the word group, delete the word in,
Convert
replace it
into
with the word for.
Get rid of in. In is out.
That's it. In is
Oh,
out,
yeah,
for is
sorry.
in.
And the Hawke's Bay Regional Planning Committee Act 94.
Yeah.
2015?
Oh, it's younger than I thought, 2015.
I was going to say, 94?
Were you around then? Yep.
Where did
and
my
I should know
life
that.
go? Wasn't that long ago.
And if we add Hawke's Bay in front of regional,
For correction, yeah, for correctness. Hawke's Bay Regional Planning Committee Act.
No.
No, Hawke's
Regional
Bay.
Planning Committee Act, it should be Hawke's Bay Regional Planning Committee Act.
Thank you. Okay, I think the conversation has brought us to a good space. It's clarified the various roles of our Māori Standing Committee and the RPC with regards to the legislative requirements. It articulates what was mentioned earlier on around working together and the formation of all governance group. And that this is about working together in the development of the Kotahi plan, which doesn't diminish or alter the role of the Māori Standing Committee or the legislative requirements of the RPC. So the Act 3.3, are we all happy with how it reads? Are there any other changes to that?
Could you please read that again, Chair, because we can't see the screen.
Right. So 3.3 currently reads as, combine the Māori Committee and the Regional Planning Committee meetings to form an all of Hawke's Bay Regional Council Governors Group for the development of Kotahi Plan and process, was that processes? Process, subject to the requirements of the Hawke's Bay Regional Council Planning Committee Act 2015. Yes, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Just one question. Now that we've removed decisions, is that remaining off this paper completely? There's nothing around decisions anymore.
For those motions, yes, just so that we clarify the different, like what was mentioned, the ability to participate in decisions was mentioned earlier on in the paper in number 4, I think it is. Yep, officers are seeking a formal commitment from the Regional Planning Committee to work in partnership with the Māori Committee to support their role in Kotahi, whereby the Māori Committee consider and endorse decisions prior to ka pai. So number 4 picks up that decision criteria, whereas the amended recommendation speaks to the more global intentions of what we want to achieve. Would that be right?
That's correct, Chair. And just to be clear, for Councillor Taylor, there are decisions all the way through this process that will be made at an operational level. This does differentiate between those which are legislative.
Yeah,
correct. All governments. Okay. Awesome.
So just to be clear about this, so the All of Governance group will be making decisions as we go through.
Yeah.
And that it's only at the point that it comes to the notification of the plan will we have to be cognizant of the Hawke's Bay Regional Council Planning Committee Act and its requirements for both the RPC and the council. We're all clear on that?
No, we're not.
Councillor Coote.
Well, let's be clear that it's all the way through. It's making recommendations. I just don't want everyone in the room to have the be under an illusion that somehow we are deferring decision-making at that level. I'm sorry to be pedantic about that, Chair, but we need that clarity that it's all the way through, it's a recommendation. They're making a series of recommendations.
Well, at some point, they're going to have to make a decision as to whether go left or right. At the end of it, someone's have to go sign off, so there'll be a further decision. But if it's only recommendations and you exclude decisions, then you can't make a decision. You have to be able to make decisions. Whether it's the final decision or not is a moot point. But it does have to make decisions. If it can only just make recommendations, well, that's not a decision.
But under the Act, it can make a decision to recommend. That's its limit, decision-making limit. Under the Act, we've already included that.
I don't know what value it adds to this process by continuing to bang that nail.
That's right.
That is what it is. This committee operates as it does. So it's not, I don't think it adds value.
So, I mean, the point is that the committee can make decisions, but at the end, it's going to have to be a big decision whether we accept it or not. So there's levels of decision. To deliberately exclude decision-making from this process is going to simply weaken its effectiveness. Why would you turn up to have a think shop? Why, if you're here to make decisions about a plan, the plan's got to be finally at the end signed off on it. That's another decision. But this decision's got to be made on. There's some tough decisions to be made. They are decisions.
James, you might already have my question. Did you want to say something?
Well, look, I just wanted to reinforce, which may be just ambiguous in this whole exercise, but what was intended by way of the staff advice on this was to seek agreement, which we believe is within the purview of each of the committees involved, to resolve, to come together and to work together and make decisions to either endorse, in the case of the Māori Committee, or recommend, as in the case of the RPC, a plan, the Kotahi plan, for council to ultimately notify and adopt. So there is a collaborative, inclusive decision-making process that's envisaged. I think that is consistent with the roles and responsibilities of the various committees, and it doesn't detract from the fact that ultimately council has to make the final decision step in terms of that decision to notify. But in the spirit of the RPC Act, it's quite clear that council wouldn't unilaterally notify a plan without advice from the RPC, and if it was concerned about what was recommended from the RPC, there are refer back provisions in the Act itself. So really this was about bringing everybody together and agree a way of working that will ensure that by the time that final decision is taken, everybody is sufficiently well sighted on the plan for notification and has been sufficiently engaged in the development of it, so that we minimise the chance that there be disagreements or concerns about that plan when council comes to that point. So I think that does require active decision making. It's not the final decision, and we do have the Māori Committee and the RPC making decisions regularly to endorse things, adopt things, note things, receive things, all those sorts of things.
So based on their comment, are we suggesting that it's the terminology that's providing confusion here? Because the term decision is used across those different, from operation up to governance, and so...
recommendation as it's written is fine. It does exactly what I'm hoping it does. I don't have a problem with that.
I'm just picking up on Jacqueline's point. She said we removed decisions, so you're saying that it's not. And I just come back to the basic philosophy of this. When the Regional Planning Committee first came along, there was tension between the RPC and the PSGE reps and councillors, because there was two tiers of decision making, and there were threats at one stage that the council would simply go and make its own decision regardless of the RPC. And so people retreated to their corners and became tense. And the idea behind this is to try and avoid people having corners. That's why I've used the phrase decision making without walls. So if we're all in the process, we all make the decision together, it's our decision collectively. So that's the best decision. If we're going to start erecting walls again, we're going to go back to where we were. And so my view is that we should be making decisions because we are, after all, the same people. We are, after all, dealing with the same problems on behalf of all the community. And if we have to have some at the end of it, some formalities about the RPC and council signing off on it, because that's what the law requires, we can do that. But we know what the answer, should know what the answer is before we even ask the question. So we're all here together to make decisions. We're all here to agree.
Yeah,
Councillor Ormsby.
Thank you. Look, I'm happy to support the amended motion that was just put up. And I do that because, I personally am entering into this with willingness and a spirit of more inclusiveness and more collaborative way without contravening what our responsibilities are as separate committees and council. But I think in principle, I support where we're going with this and for the sake of time, I think, for today's meeting. This could still be a conversation, maybe the next all governors hui, that we can take this conversation a bit further. But for now, in principle, I support these motions, 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, and 1 and 2.
You move.
I'm happy to move.
Thank you. So we have a mover. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Given we have discussed this at length in almost every perspective we can. Thank you, Councillor Van Beek. So that's a first by Councillor Ormsby, seconded by Councillor Van Beek. This is normally where we would have a discussion on the motion. So I'll open up the table for that opportunity, please. Even though we've addressed a couple of points.
You're asking the.
I've said my piece, thanks.
Said your piece. Councillor Jeff, you want to reserve the right to speak? So I'm only going to reiterate really what Councillor Ormsby has said. This is a fast-moving piece of work and there isn't anything we can lock down in concrete around this, and we have to be flexible given the timeframes to achieve those outcomes. And part of that flexibility is the expressions we've all made, which is to work collaboratively in this space under some pressure and not to be too fixated on some things. There are risks associated with that. And so many of those risks were addressed by the Māori Standing Committee coming forward. Some of them we've pointed out today, and that's the participation of tangata whenua reps in some of these formation or formative documents and decisions before they reach an agenda. So, but it's hoped in good faith, as was mentioned, we'll all walk into this space genuinely in good faith. And that's going to be a significant challenge because it means, for me, it means a change in the way our relationship will need to be guided over the formation of this plan. But also the indicators around if it is a collaborative process, then we won't see some of those challenges like we had this morning around follow-ups with input, etc., not eventuating. So that's with regards to my comments. So Mike, did you have kōrero?
Yes, just that the Māori members have grown to trust these councillors. I hope they're going to be back after October.
Yes.
Are you on the general role?
Thank you, Mike. You're right, this is the formation of a growing relationship which has been growing over a number of years, so ngā mihi for that. Councillor Curtin.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair, and my view on this is, and I'm fully supportive of the recommendations as they are, and I think it's a very significant step forward. I'm very, very enthusiastic about the nexus of both the Māori Committee and the RPC. I think it's a really positive move forward. I'm reflecting on 20 years of experience back in 2022 and travelling to Tuai with Mr. Mohe, putting my life in my hands. And so I reflect on that because that's 20 years of experience brushing and working in the Māori world, realising its complexities, realising the complexity of the Māori Committee and its foundation and mandate, and ditto with the RPC. I've traversed right through that journey. The initiation of the tank process makes me cautious, and the outcome of the tank process makes me cautious, and decision-making over 6 years around the RPC, and that's why I'm rather committed to considering the detail and the detail around good process, because I know that Māori around the table are needing to go back and talk to their people. And those messages can be sometimes lost, confused, etc., particularly over the passage of time. And what we're talking with Kotahi is the passage of time. People will come and go, including councillors around the table, and Māori committee and RPC representation will change similarly. So the goodwill and intent expressed today is often lost in the mists of time. So therefore I'm suggesting that the process is being focused on, that we do look at the devil is in the detail, and that we do have reporting both back to the Māori committee and to the RPC on a regular basis as those decisions / recommendations are made, so that they are endorsed all the way along the track, and there is feedback to the Māori community about that. And I think if we follow that path, we will not fall down the holes we fell down on the way through with the tank process. Thus my level of a pedantic approach to getting this conversation right from the start.
Yeah, Councillor. Kia ora. Any further comments? I'll go to the Chair and then I'll come to you, Peter, if that's
Can I
right.
just pick up on a couple of things? I don't think I have a slightly different perspective on the failures of the tank process from Councillor Curtin. Part of the problem with the tank process is it started one place and enter stage left. Partway through was the settlement of a number of treaty groups in the area and setting up of the Regional Planning Committee, which came on the scene partway through. It was also trying to learn to live together, the tension between the Regional Planning Committee and the Council, who had what role, who had what dominance, who could make what decisions. And there was, as Mike Mohi has put it, quite a lot of elbow jolting as we went along. There's some pretty tense meetings. And that's because people saw themselves as having their own corners and their own space and their own decision making, and were exercising the power from there. The fundamental philosophy behind this approach is if we're all on the same team, then we all participate, we all go through the same time. We will hopefully arrive at the end with a better chance of agreement and therefore success. The one element that we haven't got to yet, which will be probably a discussion for us somewhere down the track, is the involvement of Nikki. I do see that we need to engage with Nikki on this process. We have, Nikki have been an active participant in hearings, appeals, objections and so on. So we need to find a way in which we can embrace them, I think, in this. But it's, as Councillor Williams has said, it's a moving space, an evolving space. But if we keep at it, the central principle, the philosophy, and I would say if we establish a process, but this is how we do our work, a kawa, a protocol, then any new incoming people will be introduced into that protocol. This is how we work, we do this differently, we want that. So it should then transcend and move forward from a councillor, RPC member to RPC member to a Māori committee to Māori committee member. So it's just a way we do our work. It's a better method way in which we do our work, how we manage our issues, how we resolve our things. And that is more important, in my opinion, than the finite rules of the law and who signs what when. If we agree, and we can then go through the formalities later. We have to get a better method of work than we've had before. And I think this is a really good step, and I'm really pleased the progress we've made here.
Conscious of the time, I'll leave Peter to make the last comments for today.
Just carrying on, I think, from Councillor Barker's narrative and coho there. what we've been trying to address and what the staff will attempt to do as we move through the Kotahi process is to build in opportunities where you can be participative in each of these. And I go back to the point that was made by Councillor Ormsby. What we're essentially saying, if we're working in the spirit of this, is no te raudo, nāku te raudo, ko tipai ngamai, which is what you have in your food basket and what we have in our food basket, then we will make success. And that's what this is really about in spirit. I think the other part is that in our previous life and experience, there have been certain inefficiencies which we're all well aware of in terms of the way that we have worked. This is about reducing those inefficiencies, bringing things together, bringing people together. That's what this is about. So on behalf of the staff and our Chief Executive, I just want to acknowledge the Regional Planning Committee. We did eventually get to that point, and anei rā mātou e mihi rā kia koutou through you, Chair. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you for that. Thank you very much for that debate and conversation today. It's been good. There were a number of areas that I was looking for clarity in, and we've achieved those.
Yes.
With regards to those other spaces, we'll wait for the next opportunity as the motion and discussion has been well canvassed. So we have a mover in Councillor Ormsby, a seconder in Councillor Van Beek. I'll put it to the vote now. All of those in favour of the recommendations, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Against? Abstains? The motion passes and carried. Ngā mihi nunui kia koutou katoa. And I'll seek now, first of all, my apologies to the committee for, I did want us to take some time on that one. And so I realise now that we're approaching 1:15, and according to my schedule, that's when we will be needing a water break. What is the feeling of the committee at the moment for moving on to item 8, operational land asset policy? And can we try, I know we say this nearly every meeting, as best we can, to bring that to a close as quickly as possible. Operational land policy, item number 8 on the agenda. Chris, no mahara mai.
Thank you, Chair.
Right.
Fresh out of isolation.
Not quite, but anyway. Thank you, Chair. So, look, this is an opportunity to share our operational land policy with the RPC. Just to let everyone know where we're at. This is really a policy that we would use within the organisation, a staff policy for them to basically follow a number of steps to assess if we do have any excess land, how we would fairly and equitably dispose of that land. So what you are seeing is an operational policy. We don't normally bring them either to council or to RPC. Because of the level of interest in this policy, it's a policy that we should have always had. It's quite normal for an organisation to have a policy to help staff deal with any requests for land or what you may do with land that becomes surplus to our operational requirements over time. So it really is a normal part of the suite of tools that an organisation would have. So it does not signal that we are embarking on a major review of our land holdings or have a major change in how we have an interest in the land. It's simply articulating that we're creating this internal process for assessing these opportunities. And that's important because we do have 4 requests for land that are currently sitting with us, one in Parongaho, one in Ngātaroa, one at Waiheke and one at Ohiti. And they've been sitting with us for a number of years as staff and councillors have been working through how to deal with it. So this is the starting point to work through a process to understand the technical aspects of the land and the correct, if it is indeed surplus, what are the opportunities, particularly for tangata whenua, to be involved in the access to their land. So really didn't want to get through the detail. It basically outlines the process that staff go through, an assessment process that is then taken to council for a decision. And then there's a whole lot of detail in the policy around how a business case is put together, etc., etc. So it's quite a comprehensive process. One of the challenges we have this activity is it's not specifically funded. So we have to work out how we fund this activity. Some land matters are very complex. We need a lot of external advice to help us with those. Others are more simple. The reason this is a consideration is all of our schemes are targeted rate schemes, and some of our schemes are quite small. So if you look at Paronga Ho, for example, we would only spend $20,000 in that scheme a year. So to go through a land analysis is actually quite complex. For Heretaunga, the budgets are a lot bigger, so it's not such an impact. So staff have put forward a proposition that I think up to $20,000 we would look at funding to work through that process. But if it was a really complex case, we'd be looking for a contribution, and that's a policy setting that still has to be finalised. But look, this paper has been through to our CNS committee, has been to the Māori committee, and now it's with the RPC, asking for feedback and effectively endorsement of our policy, and then it will go back to council, at which point hopefully they will accept it, and then we can start using it. So I think that's the highlights. Didn't want to get in the detail of the decision tree and every question that we go through. That really sits with staff to work through that. It's very similar to other organisations. It's pretty sort of basic question and answer sort of thing, but happy to take any comments.
Thank you, Chris. I specifically asked that this item be brought to the RPC, and I'll acknowledge first off that it is an operational policy and does not normally sit in this space. But as you mentioned in your kōrero and when speaking to the paper, it does represent opportunities. And so staff, under the direction of councillors here, are looking for ways to encourage positive communications and conversations on specific land-related issues across our 5 takiwā. And so the reason that I asked for it to be brought to this agenda was because it does represent those opportunities, and I have spoken with our TWR members. It also signals a change in thinking for HBRC from governance down to operations. It reinforces those expressions we've made around iwi and takiwā partnerships with our mana whenua. But more importantly, it puts a good tool in the hands of our staff to be able to leverage positive conversations around land management, kaitiakitanga, cultural access, and safety and resilience for our community. So wasn't looking to get into the details, but I did want to make sure that as members of this committee, we were aware of the positive indicators that this policy provides for engagement at a catchment level. So thank you for bringing it to us. I'm quite happy to move from the chair for the recommendations of those 2 recommendations, that the Regional Planning Committee receives and considers this policy, and that the committee recommends that Hawke's Bay Regional Council agrees that the decision has been made of the significance and engagement policy. And the third one is adopts the operational land policy. So I'm quite happy to move, and I'll open up the table for questions to staff, if there are any questions of Chris around this policy. And I know that councillors have already had two bites at the apple here, so you are welcome to have a third bite, but TWR members, this will be your first bite. Mike.
Yes, I've been involved with some treaty claims where, I'm not sure this word, exasperation of tangata whenua, they turn around and give it back to DOC. And the actual answer to that, which started with Ngāti Hene in the north in the 1990s, and with Tangitu not so long ago at Tangoio, giving it back, and we just got it, now you're giving it back. No, we're giving the management back and the costs. And so to our own people, you've got to realise we're not giving it back as an ownership, but we're just giving it back for you to spend your money on. And, you know, I would like to support the trebling of the money to our area, Paronga Ho, if you could.
Thank you, Mike, and I'm sure the committee will take that under consideration. Ngā mihi, any other kōrero? No, then can I have a seconder for the motion?
I will.
Kia ora, Alana. So that's moved by myself,
Right,
seconded
and
by
Gams.
Alana
You
Hiha.
can see it.
All in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Abstains? Ngā mihi, motion passed. Regional Water Security Program, that's 30 minutes. Can I suggest we do that post-lunch?
Aye.
Good suggestion, great call.
Cool, and our staff, we're still waiting for our staff to turn up. So, on that note, we will adjourn for lunch. Ngā mihi nunu kia koutou. When are we due back?
1:45.
1:45.
1:45 for those online. Ngā mihi
Where do you
nunu
have
kia
to go,
koutou.
Neil?
Enjoy your lunch. Kia ora koutou katoa, nau mai haere mai, welcome back to the Regional Planning Committee of Hawke's Bay Regional Council. We are now currently up to item number 9 on the agenda, which is the Regional Water Security Program update. We have Amanda Langley joining us online, and we have staff who will be leading us through the front of this conversation. So I'll hand it over to you guys. Take it away.
Kia ora koutou, thanks, Chair. My name is, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Tom Skirman. I work for Regional Council and running this thing for a few years called the Regional Water Security Program. I've been in front of the RPC previously on this topic, but it's been a while. I've been in front of the Murray Committee a number of occasions, and of course in front of Council a fair few times. To my left is Erin Hartford-Wright. She is not an employee of Regional Council, but is someone who's supporting the project, is supporting the engagement process that we're going to run around the Regional Water Security Program. You've identified Amanda Langley, who is also an external, who may be online, who's supporting the project. And just like to say a hello in the room to Di Smith, who is not in here in any official capacity, but is one of our someone who's been worked on the project with us over the summer. So good to see you, Di. So just a quick recap for those of you who this is new. This is effectively a same presentation I gave to the Murray Committee last week, and the slide order might be slightly different to your slide deck. So if you're following that through, just be aware we might be slightly out of sync. Like I say, it's been some time since I've been to the Regional Planning Committee. I'm a bit nervous to see that the chair now wears camouflage. I'm not sure.
So you can't see me coming, Tom.
Yeah. So it's so slightly nervous. But the Regional Water Security Program is a conversation around water quantity. Now I know there's a lot of conversation around water quality, which is a very important conversation, and water quantity is also linked to water quality, and so we're not trying to prize them apart. But it's a very big conversation. It's a conversation that's been happening at Regional Council for not for a couple of years, but for many years, and because we know that this region, the east coast of the North Island, has certainly has learned to and has embraced the water and uses it very extensively. And so the kind of high-level objective of the Water Security Program is, as written on the screen there, that Hawke's Bay has long-term, climate-resilient and secure supplies of fresh water for all. And as I've said before, the complexity of this project mostly sits in those last two words, and that's what makes this such an interesting program of work, and sometimes not easy, but a worthwhile challenge. So, to sort of kick this program off, we've sort of been asking the question again around water quantity. How much water are we using now? Who's using it? How might the future use of that water look? How's climate change going to impact that story? How can we better manage demand? Because we know that managing, if we're talking about quantity, it's fundamentally a story about supply and demand. And we know that we're going to have to be relentless in the way we manage demand, because we know that it's something we can do. And then also, equally as part of the project, is what, if any, options do we have to increase the supply of water? And so we'll dive into that a little bit more. Some of our initial, so where do we start from? Well, we know, from our plan changes and our processes and where the community, sits, is that everyone really understands there's not really much more water that the environment can give. In fact, some people would say the environment's given too much. And so the starting point is, I think we can safely assume that there's no, in the absence of doing anything, there's no more supply. There's no more resource to tap, although there probably are some parts of the region further north where, water is, still sits in relative abundance. And so we can talk about that later. So, we also know that there's tremendous pressure on demand, from all parts of the community, and there's also pressure on demand from the environment, because the environment, increasingly, needs more water, and so, a stylised, view of our future looks, something like this graph in terms of, a gap, And so we've tried to dig into those numbers a little bit, and we've done, these are provisional numbers. The final report will show some slightly different numbers. But we took the 1920 year. In that year, we pulled about 100, across the region, we pulled about 161 million cubic metres of water out of the system. That's from surface water and groundwater. If we make some assumptions about going to the future, making no assumptions about any increase in irrigation, so absolutely restricting, no sense that we can expand irrigation. But if we just looked at industry and population growth, and I suppose the extra demand we expect to see on plants just through hotter, drier climates, we begin to see, and these are some mid-range numbers, there are some scarier numbers associated with this. You begin to see by 2040, that the region is 32 million cubic metres short, which is a big percentage of 161. And then out to 2060, 45 million cubic metres of water short. And so in the absence of doing anything, then, that doesn't really paint a very good picture. Clearly, this is replicated all around the world. Who's using that water? Well, predominantly agriculture. It's using over half the water. Second cab off the rank is our towns and cities in terms of municipal supply. And then third item is industry, which you call the processing industries, the ones that are in town, often linked to the primary sector, but not always necessarily. And so so that's where the water's going. And so when we're thinking about the supply and demand future, we need to think about those numbers, and and clearly that's why there's been a lot of focus in this organisation around irrigation efficiency, and a long-standing program of work around working with irrigators to improve how irrigators use demand, because that's where all the big volume is. And the good thing about here is that you can see that sometimes you can apply a large effort to a sector, but is that really going to move the dial? And so that's it's important to sort of, when we think about how we're going to prioritise our approach to this. Now, what's affecting this story? Well, clearly climate change is affecting the story, and we know that that Hawke's Bay is going to be, across New Zealand is going to be, severely affected, relative to the rest of the country, and there's there's data that suggests that the Tukituki River, for example, is probably going to be the most impacted river when it comes to average flows by climate change. And so, again, this is a story that, Regional Council's been talking about for a long time. And then, so we have the current supply and demand. We have where we think that, the pressure on demand is going to increase. We're worried about, what's the impact of climate change on supply. And then, the third really thing that makes this incredibly interesting is the reform, the regulatory reform. And that kind of sits really strongly with this committee and the conversation you've had around kotahi. And so this water security program, I want to be really careful to say, is that it is a subset of the issues that you'll be considering in kotahi, but it is going to be one of the issues that you'll have to grapple through kotahi. And so, and this is, I'm certainly no expert on Te Manaroto Wā, and I won't hold myself out to be, but we all know that Te Manaroto Wā introduces a hierarchy of priority of access to water, okay, and it says that, the first and foremost, the first allocation of water goes to the environment. And so that's why we've put this water, we're trying to represent Te Manaroto Wā in a bucket, and, and at the bottom of the bucket sits the allocation that, is required to go to the water. And that's obviously going to be a huge part of the kotahi journey is to figuring out, how much water needs to be held in the environment. The second priority under the NPSFM 2020 is for human health and well-being. And that's really more about, cooking and cleaning and health and things like that. It's not about washing your car necessarily. It's probably not about watering your lawns necessarily. And so, not all the water that cities take, is necessarily protected in that hierarchy. And so then the third and sort of final allocation is what they call, has generally been called extractive use. People using water mostly for industry, mostly for business, but also for community and some cultural needs. It's the last cab off the rank in the NPS 2020 framework. And so that's why, and I'm sure over the next couple of years you're going to be going over this, a huge amount. I think the important thing to note about this bucket is that it empties from the top. It's not leaking from the bottom. It empties from the top, and so the less water there is, it doesn't really matter what the demand is. Then that's there's less water available to that top allocation. Or equally, the higher the bottom allocation is, the more water is required for the environment, the more those top layers get squeezed. And so that's just the nature of it. Okay, so really important context for this committee, particularly in relation to Kotahi. And so, look, water security's got a strong history in this organisation, and there's some quite polarised views around how we approach water security. Some will say, just increase supply and then we'll fix our problems, and some will say, well, that's the wrong thing to do. Just pull back demand, and that's the way forward. And so, I think it's going to be important. And I'm not telling you this. I'm just I suppose I'm raising the idea. It's going to be really important, the mindset that council and this committee and the Māori committee have as sort of custodians of the Kotahi plan change. What is the mindset that we approach this problem with? Because it is a really, in the vernacular, it's a really wicked problem, right? And it points to a lot of issues. And so, the way I see it, and this is borrowing some of the phraseology that comes from the discussion around climate change, because it's very linked to that. We sort of, when it comes to water security, when we look at the fact that we're pretty much out of water now and demand pressure's increasing, we kind of, to me, in my mind, we sort of are at a bit of a fork in the road in how we approach this problem. And we can sort of think of this view in terms of, in terms of pessimism and scarcity, saying, look, there's a fixed sum and we're going to really figure out how, we're going to reallocate that and, and kind of have a fight over it and sort of manage sort of a shrinking pot of water. Or we need to think, or we can think in terms of, we're going to approach this problem with a degree of optimism, with a degree, thinking in terms of abundance, and thinking in terms of regeneration. And when we'll come back to abundance, but abundance isn't just about getting more, it's about sharing, and it's about thinking different ways of using water and things like that. So it's really important to come to this debate, because I think the community will be quite activated about it. There's a lot at stake in access to water, we know that, and what we're trying to do through the water security program is present as many options as possible for decision makers like yourselves to think about how are you going to balance these things out. And so I think when I think about the right hand side, I'm not sure what you're looking at. When we come back to those first two words that I mentioned as being so important, for all, how are we going to provide water for all? I think where we land in our mindset is going to be really, quite powerfully, point to where we head in that. So in terms of optimism, we want to involve and collaborate and empower mana whenua, to ensure, that the Māori of the water bodies is strong, and we've been doing that through the program. In particular, we've worked obviously, through these committees here. We've been having some direct discussions on marae with various entities, community updates, providing information, working really hard to make sure that we're doing cultural impact assessments and things like that early in the piece, not late in the piece, because that's, obviously, that can be, that's the wrong way to go. And we can talk about our Aquifer Recharge project, which is very much in that mode, and opportunities through this program to support the development of cultural monitoring programs to make sure that these solutions are working. So, just an example of working with mana whenua, we've had some great engagement in Central Hawke's Bay. Down there, we've had hui, in evenings and weekends, and just tried to work down there. We've been on site, and when we're really just talking about what it is that we're trying to do, and trying to get as many people looped into that conversation, so that when it does come to get lodging a consent for that sort of work, that there is there's an understanding. It's not who are you and why are you here, and and this we didn't know about this. And so, we're really excited about that that project, and it does have to go to consent. We're just finishing off hopefully a cultural impact assessment now, and that can then feed in, and we'll be ready to go to consent. And the exciting thing about that is the Aquifer Recharge project, which I'm happy to take questions on, but it's really about taking water away from the river and returning it back to the waterways through the land. Is, you know, it is a science project. We want to figure out what's happening in there. It is a monitoring project. It's a great opportunity to establish, you know, and resource a really good cultural monitoring project to see how that works. In terms of, you know, the second theme of abundance, you know, and restoring the balance, again, you know, the concept water storage, you know, does activate, you know, a lot of biases and a lot of views and a lot of history. The projects we're looking at, I just mentioned the Aquifer Recharge project in Central Hawke's Bay, again, taking water, taking high flow water in the winter away from the river and then returning it back to the aquifers and seeing if that can, you know, sort of boost the supply in the aquifer. And then also we are looking in the Hiratonga catchment at above ground storage. Again, linked back to the sort of the tank plan change and the idea that, you know, we need to store water for the environment so that water is available for the, you know, principally available for the environment through the summer to support those flows during, you know, periods of, you know, when it gets very dry through the summer. And so I kind of, you know, we're always trying to think about what's the best way to think about this project. And kind of more recently, actually just today got an email from a fellow I deal with a fair bit over at Forest and Bird, and he talked about, you know, the slow food movement and the need for a slow water movement. And I think that actually, in terms of the way we're thinking about water storage for this project, is really around, you know, just slowing that water down, taking that water that was otherwise going to rip out to sea in the winter, you know, holding it back and then slowing it down so it can go through the system, you know, when the system really needs it in the summer. So I kind of like that concept around what we're doing. And look, you know, Kira, you joined us, you know, on a trip a couple of weeks ago, and you can see, you know, we're a long way back, because the point about water storage is it's not whether you want to do it, it's whether you can do it. And it's really technically very difficult. And so no one should make any assumptions around, you know, if you want water, you will go and find it. There's many a slip between cup and lip. And just regeneration, this is really more about, you know, how do we manage demand better? And again, you know, there's funding in the long-term plan, you know, to support some, you know, some innovative and, you know, and transformational thinking about how can we make sure that we're using less water, because we don't want to have a conversation with the community that's only about supply and only about storage. I think we know that demand is going to have to be met. And look, if there are no supply solutions that work and are viable, then we've only got demand to manage, and that's going to be a very tricky conversation. And so now I'll hand to Erin, and she can talk about how we're going to get there.
So clearly a huge part of this project is how we communicate these issues to the community. Some of them are quite complicated, so we're trying to sort of package things together in, you know, realistic buckets to talk to the community. So for each of the big pieces of work stream that we've got, there's some communications and engagement sections. So the regional water assessment that we're pulling together, that will have a summary document that will be available to the community. The supply side of the project, we will be putting out milestone kind of announcements about that. And equally, the demand part of this project, where we are working closely with councils and industry on how they can work more efficiently. There will be equally milestone type projects, communications stuff that comes out about that. So all of these then inform the kotahi process, and that in itself will have its own engagement processes. So just making it really clear as to where our project sits within that. Oh, wrong computer. And another thing that we want to make really clear is what this project is and what it isn't. So the Regional Water Security Program is very much focused on highlighting this water security issue. We don't think that there's as much awareness out in the community as we would hope. Climate change and that discussion is definitely pulling that discussion along, but we need to do more. And we have dedicated communications and engagement around those various work streams for the supply and the demand. we want to be really clear about what this project isn't, and it isn't about determining how regional council responds to Te Mana or Te Wai. That's very clearly through the kotahi process. It's not about setting partnership models for regional council and how it works with mana whenua, and it's not about determining Māori water rights or interests. So just very clear about that. From a communications and engagement program perspective, the communications part of this is the very tip of the iceberg. What we speak about publicly, we are definitely talking to the public about what's happening with this program, but by far and away, the majority of the effort is going into the direct engagement with our partners and key stakeholders. So if you're not seeing a whole lot of stuff out there, don't think that that's not happening under the surface of the water with this big giant iceberg that we've got here. So what happens next? We are building this program over time and engaging with more and more partners and stakeholders. We'll be obviously investigating the water supply and storage options, investing in that reduction in water use and increasing efficiency with the business community and councils, and making sure that water security forms a significant part of the kotahi conversation, and just generally raising public awareness. Do you want to talk about what's next?
So it's me, don't it?
You can.
Am I better up?
So that the kotahi plan change, that's, all of these things are where this program sort of feeds into, the long-term plan and initiatives that will come out of that. And then consultation and discussion for water supply options will come out of the kotahi process and other processes beyond that.
Yes, I think, sorry, Erin, I think that, the point there is we just really want to emphasise is that you're not doing kotahi over here and water security over here. It's not, and because then you'll just be wondering, how's that, this is, and we're really pleased that I think, Kira, you've been appointed as a sort of as a lead in terms of water security issues for that kotahi plan. So we really enjoy working with you just to make sure that we're feeding them, and this is an issue that's not missed.
That's you.
It's us, Chair. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, guys. You've really addressed a couple of questions that I've had in the back of my mind as we've been rolling through, so thank you for that clarity. I'll move to the table for questions of staff. Or to the wall. No? Excellent.
I just have a question. I wasn't able to attend the site visit, and I was very upset about that.
Super spreader.
Yeah, apart from that part of it. But just to unpack a little bit of what you said before, an option there is to store water, and is that the E2? Or is it, whatever the name of the dam is, and you then release it at a time of otherwise low stream flow, so that people who are maybe nowhere near that particular stream environment aren't caught by low flow bands, which wouldn't really benefit the river because they're so far away. Is that the kind of the logic that
you
give an immediate benefit to the stream rather than telling someone who's 5k away to turn their tap off when that benefit won't feed back to the stream until the next winter? Is that kind of the...
So the driving philosophy of what I'd call a community water storage scheme for Here Tonga would be something that prioritises environmental flows. And if the prioritisation of that environmental flows actually achieves an outcome, that means that that people can continue to take and maybe avoid bans, and they share in the cost of that, then it can work in that way. But I think so I think what you're pointing to is sort of goes deep into the heart of some tank policy around. There was through the tank process new science that came in that sort of said that groundwater is having an effect on streams that it wasn't really previously accounted for that much, and so therefore it raised the question: should groundwater be tied to surface flow bans, which would have, very big impact in there. It would have a very indirect impact, the bans, because you'd have to almost preempt the dry because of the delays and things like that. And so a big part of the tank process was around saying, well, how do you account for this effect in a way that actually works, and has an outcome that actually is beneficial to the environment.
Yeah, so that was the option that you went and looked at, was part of one of those schemes hooked into the tank.
Yeah. Look, there's not a lot of options, and so we're we're on a program of just quietly investigating geotechnical works to so that we can tell you whether you have that option or not.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Ormsby.
Thank you, Chair. Kia ora kōrua. This is the second or third time I think I've heard this presentation, but it reminded me around the regional water assessment and how key that piece of work is to us understanding and the public understanding the state of our quantity of water in the region. So when can that report be released? When will we see it? When will it be used as a tool for engagement and communication?
Yeah, so off the back of the interim assessment that we provided earlier, we're targeting 31 July, or the end of July, to have that report completed and back in front of you. And so then it's really a discussion for, well, how do you want to take that conversation to the public? And in some respects, although I know it's been frustrating that it's taken a while, I think as a part of the Kotahi conversation, it'll be good.
Be very timely.
It'll be very timely.
Thank you.
Thank you for your interest in that project.
Councillor Foley, then Councillor Van Beek.
Thank you, Chair. Just to rephrase what's on your screen there about the different paths to go, and you mentioned it, we either come up with new supply means, or we have to address demand. And then you keep mentioning Kotahi through the whole presentation. So is that a question you expect to get answered out of the creation of Kotahi?
Yes. I think if I look at this, and I just want to be really clear, if I look at that picture that's up hopefully behind me now, that's not a picture that says, no storage left, storage right. I think it's more about, are we happy to be open to every option that's available to us? And whereas sometimes in the past, that hasn't really been a discussion. People have come to it with, it's a fixed pie, and we're just going to drive it down, because I think, like I said before, you may not have much in the way of supply issues. We know, that water storage is incredibly difficult, and when we do have options, we should be very careful about not tossing them aside prematurely, because this future is coming at us whether we like it or not. But so where does Kotahi come into, if I sort of come to that part of your question? I mean, there's regulatory interventions and there's non-regulatory interventions, and something as significant as community storage, potentially amortising the cost of community storage over, multiple water users, particularly on the Heretaunga Plains. You've got cities, you've got, industry, you've got irrigators and things like that. You're not just going to do that through non-regulatory tools. You're going to need policy that supports that, and to the extent that Kotahi revisits some of those tank, issues, then we just need to be alive to what's going on here. So you kind of need both, and so that's why we're really clear that Kotahi is so critical to solving, this for long-term regional water security. I don't want to get to the end of that process and then say, oh, what about quantity? Because that would be job half done, in my view.
Councillor Van Beek.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. And we've walked this journey for a long time. We've been right through tank, and I really liked. I mean, you haven't got it in your slides here, but it is more or less there. That one of the slides you actually presented to council, I think it was, and you talked about making decisions in abundance rather than scarcity. Yeah. And I think that's a really good rule for us to keep in mind. That it's so much easier to actually make those decisions when we actually have abundance, and whatever that may look like. During the tank process, we did an enormous amount of modelling, groundwater modelling, and modelling is the operative word. and we still rely the data that you gave us on modelling. When do you think we will get to a time that we will be able to actually measure our water use right across all of our users? Because unless we can measure, we can't manage. So if you, for instance, hark back to what happened in Havelock North, it came out that an average householder in Havelock North was using 775 litres a day. That was the data that came out, that was modelled, whereas, for instance, every individual in Holland uses 235 litres a day. But they're all metered. Every single person who uses water, it's metered. And I think we as horticulturalists, agriculturalists, and also our town suppliers, we need to be metered to really put our finger on this, because otherwise we have conflicting data and we can't manage it. And at this point in time, when we're actually talking about models, because the models change, as you well know. The season just gone, we've used only a smidgen of the water for irrigation because it's been a very wet season compared to other seasons. So, you know, where do we hang our hat is really important. So my question to you is, will there come a time that we actually will measure rather than model?
Well, I mean, I think there's a case to be made for, you know, when you're thinking about what are your demand interventions there, would be, you know, investment in data, because, you know, data is very addictive in this space, and as you get into it, and, you know, as the tension for water becomes greater, you know, then that data is going to become more important, and we're sort of now, you know, are we facing a future where there's a bit of a beauty contest around water, and some users are better than, you know, than others, and those are decisions we've only had to make fixed decisions, not, you know, those subjective decisions. And so that's all going to come, and the data is going to be really important. I mean, thankfully, Regional Council invested a number of years ago, you know, had that big push to get, you know, metered, you know, telemetered irrigation data. Look, there's international research that demonstrates that if you have put water meters on domestic households, then, you know, you see a massive drop in water use, even if you don't apply a charge to that. It's just that people suddenly know what they're using and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, the data is a really interesting piece, and I think as the pressure comes on demand, I think the expectations around the quality of data will be much higher. But it's been, you know, quite a challenge part of the regional water assessment is to, you know, nail those numbers down.
Well, from my perspective, not so much a question, more of a comment. Thank you for the update. And I'm really keen to see how we evolve and fold into this progressive work, the learnings from the Murray-Darling Basin. They had 20% environmental flows for their plan outcomes. I know we're a vastly different geological space and all those other factors, but I'm really keen to see how we continue to define our different benefits in the space and whether or not we're able to achieve those outcomes for our environment. The only thing I would add to that is from the Tangata Whenua representatives of the RPC. We had a meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we have, from our position, to ensure, one, that we get good feedback mechanisms between your working group and our committee, but also to reinforce the dialogue that's happening in a takiwā by takiwā space. We've appointed Kiri Ropihara as our delegate to participate actively in your stream of work, and she will report back to the RPC, but also she's a live link back to the takiwā keenest interest around where this water storage project is currently being proposed. So that's the only notification I want to give to you and your team formally, that we'll be supporting Kiri in this place. You may still see the Deputy Chair and myself bouncing along for a free sandwich, but ultimately we will be leaning on Kiri as she steps into this space. So thank you, Kiri, and thank you, Tom and team, for your update. And unless there are any other comments, I'm cognizant that we are going to lose quorum in about 5 minutes.
Happy to move.
Happy to move, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Barker. All in favour, say aye. Against, abstains. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Job well done. So at this point, I've had a quick look at the remaining items on our agenda. There are no decisions as such, and they are fairly light with regards to dialogue and digging down into them. So we'll progress on, and if we do lose quorum, we're not actually generating any decisions from this point forward, mostly noting and receiving. Which brings us right up to item number 10, and I'll hand over to the Chief Executive for the policy projects update.
Anne's going to just come up front and speak to this one.
That's how delegation works. Bang, bang, bang.
Bit slow.
Tēnā koutou, ko Anne Bradbury Takarongoa. I think I've met most of you, but if not, I'm a member of Kerry Edmonds' planning policy team. So I'm just here to run you through items 10 and 11. So item 10 is the policy projects update. This is the work that we're doing. With regards to outstanding water bodies plan change, we're just continuing on with mediation at the moment with all interested parties. They're really looking at finalising the criteria which determines how we establish whether water bodies are outstanding or not. So that's what they're working on at the moment. Because once that criteria is settled, then we can get the rest of it sorted out after that. Next item is the National Policy Statement for Urban Development. The Council, along with Napier City Council and Hastings District Council, are required to develop a future development strategy. So that's a piece of work we need to do, which is essentially a mini little, I'm going to use the word spatial plan, but it's not the region-wide spatial plan across the two urban areas. So we've creating at the moment of getting a technical assessment called a business analysis underway, and that's something else that we're required to do, which will inform part of that plan. So we're at the very early stages of the future development strategy at the moment. And that is about it, really, from me, unless there's any questions.
Any questions of staff from the table, please? No questions or comments. Can I have someone move to receive the report, please? Councillor Van Beek, seconded by Councillor Chairman Barker. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Abstentions? Passed. Sorry, it's only time pressure that makes it seem like I'm not giving you valid validation. Thank you very much for your report. And now on to item 11.
Me too. So this is our statutory advocacy update. Now, some things have changed since we wrote this paper. We were expecting the exposure draft of the National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity, and that actually came out last Thursday, so that's not in this paper. The exposure draft is generally in response to feedback, and it is more about, they're putting it out for comment, not about whether you like this policy or not like the policy, but it's more about whether the drafting is clear or whether there's any unintended consequences. So, yeah, last week the exposure draft for the MPS for Indigenous Biodiversity came out. They've made a few key changes. We haven't assessed this yet because it's only just come out, but there's been a few changes. So they're looking at providing for activities which are important for people's economic well-being, such as farming, forestry, and the provision of infrastructure and energy. They're also recognising tangata whenua as kaitiaki and allowing for development of Māori land in partnership with tangata whenua, and something about geothermal areas, which doesn't really cover our rohi. Along with the exposure draft for Indigenous biodiversity, they've also put an exposure draft out for the National Environmental Standard and National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management, and those are around wetland provisions. So we'll be looking at those three exposure drafts and making sure that they all work together well, and there's nothing that is too concerning for us in there. Next item is the draft National Adaptation Plan. This was presented to the council meeting on the 27th of May, and it's up on the submissions webpage. We generally supported the objectives of the plan. We stressed that adaptation needs some urgency, and we talked about having more focus on flood events as they are problematic in this region. The New Zealand Freight and Supply Chain Issues paper, we're just reviewing that document at the moment to see if there's anything we need to make any comments on, but I don't have an update on that one at the moment. Next one is Central Hawke's Bay District Plan Review. They're on their stream 3 of the hearings. This is relating to rural environment. we will not be attending this week as our submission points were accepted. So there's no need for us to attend that. So that district plan review is just progressing along.
Can I just interrupt your flow, sorry?
Yep.
After your draft national adaptation plan comments.
Yep.
You mentioned another activity or update activity that before the Central Hawke's Bay District Plan Review, which is not in my printout.
Have I got, on page 3 of the attachment, New Zealand Freight and Supply Chain
That's it.
Issues paper? Have you got that?
It's in there.
Sorry, am I going too quickly?
No, it's all right. I'll follow up later. It's just missing from my printout. That's
Oh.
it. Thank you.
Has everyone else got it?
Yeah, it's on your screen.
Yeah, okay.
Cool. You can carry on.
Central Hawke's Bay, and then the next one is the Marine and Coastal Area Act, which the stage 2 hearing has finished in the High Court. That actually went quicker than was expected, which was great. So the hearing's been finished and we're just waiting for the decision from the judges. And that's the end. Sorry if I rushed through that quickly, but.
No, I appreciate you rushing through, and I apologise you felt you had to, but with regards to, any questions from the table? Thank you, acknowledging your absence. 2 questions. Yes, councillor Foss.
One was probably more for James, and the second one is for yourself. James, why on earth would we even spend time on the supply chain and logistics discussions document?
Because of our regional transport planning functions.
That's why. Okay, right. He says with a big sigh. Okay, the second one was at first glance, the national freshwater standards, you said particularly to wetlands. Just at first glance, appreciate it only just recently came out. Anything you've just see in there that is at first glance kind of not consistent with where we're going and what we're doing as a council? Can you see any fishhooks kind of developing there?
I don't have too much information on it at the moment, but I appreciate you asking about first glance. So the wetland provisions were consulted on in September and October of last year, so we put a submission in on those. And so now they've come back with this exposure draft in response to that submission. I think there are a few tricky little things that relate to how the NPS for Indigenous biodiversity meets with the NES for wetlands. So I think that's really what we're going to be concentrating on. I don't think there's anything in there that we're really upset with, but yeah, I don't know too much about it at this stage,
Sure,
sorry.
appreciate that. Well, just Chair, then, just can we keep an eye on that one in particular as it wanders through the process and learn more about it? Thank you, thank you.
We will update you more when we've had a proper look at it.
Cool, and I've only got one sort of question to ask of you with regards, again, with the draft National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity. You mentioned that the conversations have highlighted the ability to work with tangata whenua, particularly around development opportunities. Earlier today, we talked about resource consenting with positive outcomes, which is a different drive. Is there any conversation in that spaces around restorative activities versus development activities, or are they seen as the same thing?
That is a good question, and I don't know that I know the answer to that.
Cool. It's right, we might be able to catch up again
Yeah.
on the next update, but if you could keep an ear to the ground on whether or not the terminology is shifting and providing for restorative activity as much as development, that would be great.
We could have a vote now because there's more Maoris here than voting.
Right, outside of that, do we have any other comments or questions for the officer? No? Very well. Can I have someone to move and second the receiving of the report? Thank you, Mike. Seconded by councillor Van Beek. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Abstains? Passed. Thank you very much.
We don't have a quorum, so we can't do anything like that.
Oh, so it's just noting? We're just going to go through the motions?
We're having a chat now.
Power pie. All right. So without recording that, so that leaves us with 12 and 13, a verbal update on the government program of reforms and partnership survey, which should be quite brief.
So, Chair, just on item number 12 for this committee's awareness, the panel that reviewed the Resource Management Act for the government recommended a new approach to regional planning that would replace the planning documents for which this committee is responsible with a single combined regional plan and a regional spatial strategy that would be prepared by a joint committee involving the local authorities in the area as well as tangata whenua. that would supplant the legislated role of this committee under the Hawke's Bay Regional Planning Committee Act 2015. The government is well aware of that, and we've been advised in the last week that they have appointed Mr. Darren Ponter, who will be liaising with council as well as each of the PSGEs to assist the government in navigating how the existing arrangements of this committee can be woven into the reforms of the Resource Management Act and the future planning system. So just a heads up that this is coming, and it poses some reasonably significant legal issues for, I think, this committee and for the government, and how it continues to give effect to what is provided for in the RPC Act, and yet rationalises regional planning into one process involving the other councils in the region.
Thank you, Ian. That's a conversation I was participating in last night. So thank you for that update. Yeah, it will be very interesting. We have been contacted, like I've been contacted by Darren, so there will be an opportunity for us as Tangata Whenua members to speak directly with him and understand the impacts around our legislative position here at the committee. That's so an indicator to our team. We need to provide an opportunity for Darren to meet with the TWR members of the RPC so that we can learn to talk without acronyms. The last thing on the agenda is our partnership survey.
Just, I can just add a bit more narrative to that, Chair.
Number 12?
Number 13.
Number 13, partnership survey. Yes, please.
Yes, so this is one of our level of service measures. That's part of our long-term plan 21 to 31. And this has also been shared with the Māori committee, and it's been brought to this table. So it's the degree of satisfaction that Tangata Whenua, and particularly on this RPC and the Māori committee, have around parts 2 and 3, which is on page 117 of your meeting pack. I can read that quickly. This survey question is a new level of service measure related to the Tangata Whenua Partnerships activity in the long-term plan.
Yes.
And this is the first time we have implemented the survey, so responses will set the baseline for future reporting via the annual report. And so this is really about, in part, it's what the Māori Partnerships team are doing, but more so around how Hawke's Bay Regional Council is advancing in this area. First time we've ever done it, so that's probably enough said from me, and I'll leave it for you to pass your responses back to our governance team, in this case directly back to Annalee.
Can't find.
Thank you, Chair.
Any questions of Piri around that?
Mike asked me for red wine to help his consideration on that one.
Yes, it's a hefty topic. So my only question would be, this is the start of a new measurement and monitoring. So will this evolve over time, and are the answers you're looking for to be as narrow and specific, or can we be as broad as the sunset?
I'm not sure how to respond to this one, Chair, because if you said it as totally dissatisfied, it's all up from here.
Okay. Okay, well, we've got our benchmark. Nor Reira, that brings us no other comments or questions. Thank you. And according to my printout, which I've lost traction of, that, we had no minor matters arising for the agenda. That is all of our items concluded for today, which only leaves us to close. I acknowledge our members on the wall. Thank you for participating and joining with us today. Ngā mihi nunui ki a koutou katoa. And that just leaves us to close in karakia, please. Inoi tātou. Whakatakata hau ki te uru, whakatakata hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kine ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. He hi ake ana te atukura, he tio, he hauhuka, tihei, mauri ora. Ngā mihi nunui ki a koutou katoa.